Week 6 of college football featuring some classic matchups, including the Red River rivalry between the Longhorns and the Sooners, but also some interesting, intriguing games this week, like Maryland, Purdue, or how about TCU, KU? We'll get to all of those matchups and more, and we'll talk about Iowa, Illinois, my score prediction for the Hawkeyes and the Illini. We do start, though, in the Big 12 with TCU and Kansas. Kansas still undefeated, the surprise team in the Big 12 conference, coming off that win against Iowa State last week. I've got KU winning this game straight up. TCU, the 6.5-point favorites. No respect for the Jayhawks. Lance Leipold, one of the hottest candidates for many of these big jobs out there. Will he stay? Will he go? He's got the Jayhawks rolling. They're 6.5-point underdogs, but I like KU to win and, of course, to cover. Arkansas, Mississippi State. The Bulldogs, 7.5-point favorites. I like Mississippi State in both categories. Arkansas has been a kind of a weird read this year. I've missed on them a couple times, but I like the Bulldogs to win this game, and they win by at least 10. They cover the 7.5. Purdue, Maryland, one of the more underrated games in the Big Ten Conference this week. Of course, Iowa fans continue to follow the career of Charlie Jones. I mean, his numbers, the numbers he put up so far this year, absolutely sensational. He's like top 3 in the country in almost every category that matters as a wide receiver. And we're talking national rankings. I got Purdue winning this game. This should be an entertaining one, though. I predict higher scoring, maybe in the 30s. I like Purdue to go on the road and to win in Maryland. I like LSU over Tennessee. This is an interesting SEC matchup. The Volunteers actually 2.5-point favorites. I could see LSU winning on a field goal. This will be a one-score game through much of the game. And if anybody pulls away, it will be LSU. I've got the Tigers winning and covering the number. Texas and Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry. This rivalry has lost some pizzazz, it seems like, over the past 10 years. But I do like the fact that it sounds like Quinn Ewers is expected to play this Saturday. That should spice things up. Oklahoma, right now, the underdogs at home. How about that? Did you ever think that would be the case heading into the year? 7-point underdogs. The Longhorns favored by a touchdown and a PAT. I've got OU winning at home, of course, covering the number. So far, you see a trend in my picks this week. A lot of teams that I've got underdogs, not only covering, but winning straight up. Michigan and IU, that's the Hoosiers and the Wolverines. Right now, Michigan 22.5-point favorites. I had a hard time with this one. I mean, I look at Indiana and they're far overmatched, but 22.5 is a real big number. I'll take the Hoosiers to cover, but Michigan wins the game. Utah and UCLA, the Utes favored by 3.5 on the road against the Bruins. I like Utah to win. I like them to cover. Texas Tech and Oklahoma State should be another shootout down in Stillwater. Oklahoma State favored by 9.5. I like Okie State not only to win, but to cover that number. And I don't know if there's data to support that, but it just seems like in games like this, we tend to see a lot of points scored, and it's easier for a game to kind of get away from you if you're a Texas Tech when you have a volatile offense. And of course, they're playing at home. That's an advantage. I like Oklahoma State to win by a couple touchdowns. UNC and Miami. Miami struggling this year. It's been a weird year for the Hurricanes. So much hype with the new coaching regime. I think they bounce back against Mac Brown and the Tar Heels. They'll win, and they'll cover the number. They're favored by 3.5. Florida State and North Carolina State. The Wolfpack, another surprise team this year in college football, but to many, not a surprise. They were picked highly, mainly because of quarterback play heading into the season. They are coming off the loss to Clemson, but I like the Wolfpack here to win and to cover at home. And finally, Alabama at home, massive favorites against a really good program in Texas A&M. The Crimson Tide 23.5-point favorites against the Aggies. I like Texas A&M to cover the number. Again, it's a really big number. I like Texas A&M to cover, but Bama wins at home. I could see this game being close. All right, let's not forget what Zach Calzada and the Aggies did to Alabama last year. Not saying we'll have a repeat of this game, of that game in Tuscaloosa, but I like Alabama to win this game. Maybe a tight one, a surprising tight one. I don't know that Alabama is as invincible as I initially thought this year. Of course, Texas pushed them. Arkansas didn't really push them. They put up some points against the Tide. Again, it's kind of like an Ohio State game where you're reading into trying to find the flaws, and certainly Nick Saban will correct whatever defensive issues they had last week against the Razorbacks. But again, I like Alabama to win that game straight up. And finally, of course, Iowa and Illinois. For you Iowa fans who are watching the game you care about, I think this is a must-win. I talked about it in my preview. If you missed the preview, you can click on the little card up in the corner of the screen here on YouTube. I like Illinois. I like Illinois. I'm not trying to shock people. I mean, I don't think that's really shocking given the fact that Illinois right now, at least last check, they're favored by 3.5. To me, the directions of these two teams couldn't be in greater contrast. I'm not saying that Iowa can't win this game, but Brett Bielema is doing a great job down in Champaign. He's made a tremendous effort this week to get butts in seats, and you may make fun of them because they're not able to get sellouts, and there were 20,000 tickets available earlier this week. This has been a program that's been almost non-existent for the last decade. So, and actually more than that, more like the last 15 years, right? 2007, I think, was the Juice Williams year. But look, Brett Bielema just got here, and they've already blown out Wisconsin, blew out Virginia. They blew out a couple of inferior teams in Chattanooga and Wyoming, should have beaten Indiana. And you may say, well, that's not a tough schedule at all. Well, when have we ever seen Illinois dominate other Power 5 teams? They've done that multiple times this year. So I get Wisconsin's not what they typically are. We'll see how the Badgers finish off their year with a new head coach. But I just think Brett is a different cat. It's not like when Iowa played Rutgers and Piscataway a couple of weeks ago. It's not like when Iowa played Lovie Smith and those Illini teams prior. And Iowa struggled at times. I mean, 2020, they struggled against the Illini in Champaign. Even last year against Brett's team, they struggled at home. Iowa was down 10-0. Charlie Jones pops off a big kickoff return for a touchdown in that game. So Iowa has the tendency to struggle with Illinois. And this game on the road at night, again, I think the efforts to get fans and seats will work. And this is, I've heard some people on Twitter, Illini people, talk about how this might be the biggest game in the last decade for Illinois fans. Recipe for disaster for Iowa's sputtering offense. And talk about a recipe for disaster. Illinois' defense in every category has been elite this year. And again, you can criticize the schedule, but we've got a big enough sample size against multiple Power 5 teams. And Wyoming's a good program. I know they're kind of down this year, given some transfer portal issues and even some coaching malfunctions during the offseason. My point, though, is there's enough sample size now where even if Illinois is not a top 5 defense in the country, they're likely, more than likely, almost certainly a top 25 defense in the country. They've got an opportunity to hold Iowa down to single digits in this game. If you can do that, which is not real hard. I mean, South Dakota State did it to Iowa. Iowa State did it to Iowa. Michigan basically did it to Iowa. You don't count the late garbage touchdown. I'm nervous about this game. And I just think, being objective as I try to be here, I don't want Illinois to win. I just think Illinois gets it done behind a big game from Chase Brown and a run game for Iowa that's going to be non-existent, I'm afraid, given the run defense for the Illini. They have been really, really impressive. And they've also gotten to the quarterback a lot. I saw a stat earlier today that basically indicated that Illinois is top 5 in the country in quarterback pressures. That's going to be a struggle. Iowa struggling at quarterback, struggling up front. They struggled to stop the run last week. I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer. I got the Illini to win and to cover the 3.5 in Champaign. Of course, regardless of the game result, we'll be here with you live, taking your calls, taking your chats, and breaking it all down with former Iowa football coach, assistant coach Don Patterson. We'll be live right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We'll be simulcasting on our sister channel, Iowa Football, at the Voice of College Football. The game, of course, 6:30 p.m. Central Time on BTN this Saturday. Iowa postgame live with Coach Don Patterson to follow right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We'll see you then.